I'm Ray Chambers, and I'm the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy for Malaria. Our mission at this point, urged on by the Secretary General, is to cover everybody in Africa at risk of malaria with bed nets and appropriate medication and other interventions by the end of next year, by December 31st, 2010. And we're talking about 600 million people. We're focused on sub-Saharan Africa. Roughly 95% of the deaths from malaria occur in sub-Saharan Africa. And of that figure, roughly 90% are children under the age of 5. What really got me engaged in malaria was that Jeff Sachs, my partner in the Millennium Promise Alliance, came back from the country of Malawi with photos that he showed to me, and I saw a room full of angelic sleeping children, and I said, "Aren't they cute?" And Jeff said, "You don't understand. They're all in malaria comas, and they all subsequently died. I'll never be able to get that image out of my mind's eye." And since then have seen a number of little children in comas about to die. It's a cerebral type of death from malaria. And I think about my little grandchildren when I look at a 3-year-old lying there, can't move in a coma just from a mosquito bite that could have been prevented. The mosquito is known as the Anopheles gambia mosquito, and typically only bites after 10 o'clock at night, is most voracious around 3 a.m. And as many as 3 children can fit under one of these bed nets, 2 adults. The bed net has a twofold purpose. One is it protects those sleeping under it from getting bitten, plus the mosquito dies when she lands on the mosquito net because of the insecticide treatment, and that disrupts the whole Darwinian cycle of reproduction. So in cases where we fully covered villages with bed nets but didn't cover the surrounding villages, that Darwinian effect caused the incidence of malaria in some cases to drop by as much as 50%. There was a lot of money going into malaria from the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, from the World Bank, from the President's Malaria Initiative, UNICEF, the United States, the United Kingdom, and other European countries. But they weren't going together in the best and most cohesive way. There were disparate plans, and we encouraged everybody to come together and set up an organization called Malaria No More to work together with the Rollback Malaria Partnership. And Malaria No More's objective was to raise awareness. The American Idol show decided to have a special night called Idol Gives Back that brought awareness and attention to malaria and HIV/AIDS by the hosts going to villages in Africa and seeing bed nets being placed on the beds and children sleeping under them. And that first night for Idol Gives Back, $80 million was raised in one night from tens of thousands of viewers, and something similar happened again the following year in 2008. So awareness sprung up. Rick Riley, who wrote for Sports Illustrated, did a column called Nothing But Nets, explaining what we've talked about, and within 10 weeks he had raised over $1 million from his readers, I think 16,000 readers, and working with the United Nations Foundation, we were able to recruit the National Basketball Association and Major League Soccer to take on these bed nets as a cause. And before we knew it, fifth grade classes and sixth grade classes were having bake sales and other fundraising efforts to raise $10 so that their peers across the ocean wouldn't be dying from this disease. Last September, at a luncheon at the United Nations that Peter Chernin and I co-hosted, we announced that we had raised $3.2 billion for malaria, which principally gave us the funding we needed for the universal coverage that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had called for last April. The genesis of my engaging in full-time philanthropy, I was chairman of Westray Capital, an investment banking firm that former Secretary of the Treasury Bill Simon and I co-founded in the early 80s. Somewhere in the mid-80s, Bill and I were talking, and he said, "Isn't this great? You know, we're at the top of Wall Street with our success. We have all this wealth, but you don't seem happy." But I thought about that something was missing from what I had been programmed to think would naturally bring happiness to one's life. You know, I think when you take on big social issues, it's so important to realize that despite our business success, we don't have all the answers. In fact, we hardly have any of the answers. Both in business and in a nonprofit venture, the plans that you start with generally don't turn out to be the plans that you end up with. But getting an understanding of the funding that was available and potentially available, coming up with some quarter-by-quarter plans, how long would it take to raise the money, get the nets manufactured, deliver them, get the people to understand the benefits of the coverage. All the skills that we, Peter and I, and others learned in business, we've applied to this Rollback Malaria partnership that we're part of. I'm very optimistic that we will have universal coverage by the end of next year, and I'm equally optimistic based on the experiments we've done in villages with full coverage that we will be at or close to zero mortality by 2015, if not sooner. And on a personal level, whatever that void was that Bill Simon and I were talking about in 1985 has never been more filled, and I've never been more satisfied than I am with my life today.